directly to the killer who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you.
Hello everyone, this is Captain Howdy. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing the Delphi case again, so if you're unfamiliar with this case, I've actually linked several channels below who've covered it in its entirety. I would highly suggest you go check their videos out before you watch this one. And with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So today I'm going to be talking about the killer and what I feel the known evidence actually says about him. Now, there's a lot of YouTubers out there who discuss suspects, and this is not going to really be that kind of video. I'm more going to focus on the specific things that Bridge Guy did and the things that he likely did to commit the crime point by point and see what those things could possibly tell us about him.
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
I'm going to touch more on this later, but I'm going to start with the obvious. Liberty felt weirded out enough by this guy to actually record him. Now, in a documentary that Abby's mom did, she said that she heard an extended audio where Abby says something to the effect of like, "Is that creepy guy behind me?" Which would really suggest that they had encountered the killer before Libby actually took the video of him. So, in other words, the killer didn't just see them and walk up and abduct them. Something strange was said to them or happened before that video was taken.
You bet. And this may explain why you've been so limited on the information you've released on the suspicious vehicle or sedan parked off of County Road 300 between noon and 5. Is that the day the girls were kidnapped and presumably killed? Is that because there's somebody maybe phoning information in on a vehicle, 5,000 miles away that looks the same?
Right. Basically, this car was parked along the roadway sometime between the hours of noon and 5 the day the girls went missing, which was the 13th of April. We don't have much of a description other than it was a car.
Yeah.
We need to see if somebody can give us make, model, a color, if somebody noticed a license plate, even if they don't know if it was
Sure.
numbers, if they knew it was a state, what state the plate was out of. Because sometimes, in a small county like that, somebody may drive by and they say, "Oh, that's not from Indiana, that's from California or Tennessee."
Yeah.
They'll notice something like that, but they may not notice the whole information. So it's that any information we can get on that car would be helpful for us.
So we don't exactly know where the killer parked his car that day. Only that the police are seeking information about a car that was seen on the side of the road near that abandoned CPS building between 12 and 5. Now, in my previous video, The Two Sketches, I brought this up and I questioned whether or not the killer had parked his vehicle at this location and then went on the trails, or if later on he had to stop at that location for some reason after the murders. Either way, it appears there's enough there for the police to think that the killer's vehicle might have been at this location at some point, which is obviously not the normal parking area to enter the trails. Regardless, it doesn't really matter if he parked, his vehicle at the cemetery, if he parked it at the abandoned CPS building. If the killer drove that day, he intentionally did not park at the normal parking area. He went to the trails with a specific intention of committing a crime that day, and he purposefully hid his vehicle. The killer knew that he was on his way to commit a crime that day, and that's why he hid his vehicle, and it would appear that he attempted to enter the trails that day as unnoticed as he possibly could. He actually didn't do a bad job of this, because for 2 years the police had the wrong sketch and the wrong guy, and if the majority of witnesses that had been out there that day had seen a younger guy in the trail, then that would have been the sketch they used from the very start, but that's not what happened. It would stand to reason that very few people saw him that day, so either he's just the luckiest guy on earth, or he planned his entrance to the trails that day.
thinner, and you can see that his jacket is bowed.
So you think he's hiding something under the jacket?
I think he's got all of the things he needs to commit the crime stuffed under that jacket.
Well, I was there too.
I think almost everyone agrees that the killer brought items with him to commit the crime. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. He went to the trails that day with the full intentions of committing this crime. The victims might have been opportunistic, but the crime itself was most likely planned out in advance. Now, while it's possible that the killer just stumbled across two people at complete random, at a totally random location on the trails, and somehow managed to abduct both of them without being noticed, it is highly unlikely. The killer had taken care to hide his car, he'd masked his entrance, he brought weapons with him to commit the crime. If the killer knew the trails and the bridge, he would know that it takes some time to actually fully walk across the bridge. That's more than enough time to abduct two people without the risk of someone interrupting him. He most likely had the abduction location and the crime scene well in mind before he even stepped out onto the trails that day. To those of you who would disagree with this, I would point to the videos created by numerous other YouTubers where it suggested that he encountered the girls before Libby actually began to film him. Most people cite the creepy guy comment, which would suggest the girls encountered him previously. Well, if the killer didn't have the bridge in specific in mind, why didn't he attempt to abduct the girls when he first encountered them? They would have been alone with him, and why didn't he lead them off into the woods right then and there? I think the most likely answer here is that he knew there was a chance someone might see him. The killer wanted someone to cross the bridge that day, because once you crossed the bridge, you were isolated, and if no one was behind you, you were trapped. And I personally believe that the much more likely scenario is that the killer was actually hiding on the southeast side of the bridge. And as the girls came towards the end, he kind of came out of hiding, walked past them, and made sure no one was coming. And once he saw no one was coming, he turned around and started walking towards them. And I don't know about you, but if I saw a guy pop out from behind a tree with his coat shoved full of stuff, acting strange and walking past me, I would think he was a creepy guy too. Regardless of which scenario you think is more likely, I think it's pretty clear that the killer planned to use that bridge in specific as almost like a natural barrier to buy himself time to abduct the girls, and I think he had the crime scene picked out in advance. It's pretty easy to argue that he was able to force the girls to the murder site by using a weapon like a gun, but it's not so easy to suggest that while one girl was being murdered, the other one just stood around and waited. This suggests that not only did the killer bring weapons, but he also brought things with him to physically restrain the girls as well. He managed to actually get both girls away from the bridge, off into the woods, and kill both of them without the other one escaping.
In this audio sound test, we are located here. Randy Gravitt is located here. Let's see if Randy can hear a scream. One more time.
1, 2, 3.
This is what a scream sounds like from this location to this location.
This has always bothered me. How is it possible to kill someone and the other person not call out for help? Somehow, the killer managed to abduct two girls in broad daylight and never was seen or heard. It's one thing to be abducted silently, and it's an entirely different thing to kill someone and the other person not start calling out for help. Much like the murder weapon and the restraints, this does suggest that the killer actually brought something with him to keep the girls from making noise.
Enforcement believe, as ISP Superintendent Doug Carter stated, that the killer is local or semi-local?
Well, we just feel the way the crime occurred, where it occurred, the location. We just feel it has to be somebody that has been to that area before. It's just one of those deals where we have a some wooded area. He took these girls from the train tracks or the Monon High Bridge down to a location, and the person had to know a little bit about the river, how deep the river is, where to cross, where not to cross. So all that kind of information, it would only be known by somebody locally, more than likely.
In this interview with Minivan Traveler, Sergeant Riley makes mention that he believes that they crossed the creek at the location they did because the killer knew in advance that this was the most shallow part of the creek. Obviously, this would suggest that this wasn't the first time he was on the trails, but off the trails as well. This was someone who knew the area and had pre-planned taking the girls to the spot that he did.
Is the man that killed those girls, and I was there, Mike, as you know, in Delphi on that bridge. It's about 75 feet up. I mean, it is frightening. And the man on that bridge looks like, oh, he's just walking on the sidewalk. Want to bring in our guests now.
While this might not be that important, it does seem as if the killer's kind of comfortable walking on the bridge. While this might not seem strange to some, anyone who's seen videos of people crossing that bridge can see firsthand that it doesn't look like it's something for the faint of heart. I've only included this point because of the other evidence that suggests that this wasn't the killer's first time on the trails or the bridge that day.
Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight.
The police believe that the killer is from the Delphi area, and I couldn't agree with them more. This was planned by a person who knew the area and most likely spent time off of the trails planning this. This was almost certainly not his first time at the location he killed the girls. A quote from FBI.gov states, "Most serial killers have very defined geographic areas of operation. They conduct their killings within comfort zones that are often defined by an anchor point, like a place of residence, employment, or a residence of a relative."
We also believe this person is from Delphi, currently or has previously lived here, visits Delphi on a regular basis, or works here.
The criteria for being a serial killer is killing 3 people with a cooling off period in between. I believe, based on what we know so far of the killer, that he is either a serial killer now or he soon will be. These were pre-planned, calculated actions from someone who put time and thought into how he could do this and not get caught. He very well may still be in the Delphi area now, and could very possibly be planning another crime now that the case has kind of started to die down. So this is something that I think has been glossed over more often than it should be. In the beginning, there was a lot of speculation and controversy over a comment made by Mike Patty that Liberty's cell phone was pinging all over town, and that statement caused kind of an uproar online. And later on, it was clarified that her phone wasn't pinging all over town, and instead it was pinging off 2 separate cell towers because it's a small town and that specific area on the trails was kind of in between those towers. So if that's true, then at the very least, the killer did not have his phone turned on at the time of the murders, because his phone would have been doing the same exact thing. The police have tracked down and spoke with everyone whose phone hit a tower in that area on the day of the murders. If the killer had turned off his phone when he arrived at the trails, that almost certainly would have set off some red flags with police. I can guarantee you that they would have been looking for something exactly like that. But in the end, they didn't find anything, and that really suggests that the killer intentionally did not bring his phone with him that day, knowing that police might actually look into phone records.
Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing.
This is a strange quote for Carter, but it does make sense. This is most likely someone living in the area, and somehow they still haven't caught him. This person is probably someone that other people wouldn't suspect, or if they do have suspicions, they just refuse to believe that that person is capable of something like this. This is someone who's manipulative, and they're capable of blending in.
We believe you are hiding in plain sight.
Briefing, it seemed like you were speaking directly to whoever did this, with the sense that that person might even be in the room. Yes. Do you think that person was in the room?
I think if he wasn't in the room, he was close by, but I'm 100% convinced he was watching.
And you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
There is a very real chance that the killer is actually following this case, and he most likely has even watched videos here on YouTube. These statements that were made by police were made long after most of the POIs that I read about or see discussed here on YouTube. They were made after those people were arrested. So it's at the very least implied that law enforcement don't believe that the killer is actually currently in jail right now. There is a very real possibility that this killer is still in the Delphi area, that they're monitoring the case, and they might even be planning their next location. And that's why I think it's so important to keep this case in the public eye. Because if the public allows this case to die down, I think that there's a very real possibility that the next time we're talking about this case, it's going to be because it's connected to another murder.
And you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.